Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Idiosyncratic Fables, a part of Wilderness Fire Productions, where we are cultivating the passion for books, audiobooks, and storytelling. Since time first began, we all have been storytellers. Everybody's got a story to tell, and I want to hear yours. I'm your host, James, also known as the Kilted Narrator, and today I am thrilled to welcome author Frank Morin to the show. Frank is the master storyteller behind the explosive, laugh-out-loud epic teen fantasy series, The Petralist, the wildly fun Bacon Master of the Apocalypse, and a growing list of fast-paced adventures packed with quirky humor, unforgettable characters, and high-stakes action. Whether he's crafting magical battles with earth-shaking powers, sending heroes on culinary quests with the gods of the Pantryon, or drawing from his love of the outdoors and globe-trotting research trips, Frank's books are pure escapist fun that grab you from page one and refuse to let go. In this episode, we're talking about his writing journey, the inspiration behind his wildly creative worlds, what it takes to keep humor and momentum alive across multiple series, and what's coming next for readers. Frank, good sir, thank you so much for being on the show today. I truly appreciate you taking the time to be here.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much. That was a wonderful introduction. I'm honored and excited to chat with you and share what I can.
Absolutely. So let's kick things off in the right direction. Tell us a bit about your journey as a writer. When did you first know you wanted to tell stories, and what were some of the early influences you had?
Oh, that's a great question. It's funny, actually. I grew up as a reader first. Excuse me. I was a voracious reader and started writing when I was a teen, and I was convinced I was going to be a writer, and actually started working on a couple of books. And of course, that was before I had a computer. Thinking back at those times, it was all longhand, in a notebook and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of amazing to see how the process has changed. But I kind of put most of that aside when I got into computers and actually did that in college. My career was focusing on computers and programming and things like that. And then about 20 years ago, actually, I kind of got the bug to write again and started writing, when I could, between family and work and everything else. And my first book, it took me 4 years to write. And that was a big epic fantasy based on one that I had started writing when I was a teenager.
Oh, wow.
And it was a huge, monstrous epic fantasy that really was not publishable, especially in the day, because there were no ebooks back then. You couldn't publish a book that big.
Sure.
Well, it was all traditional publishing. And so, since then, I continued on and wrote a bunch of other stuff and have started indie publishing those. And I'm working on book 25, I think, right now.
That's awesome.
So yeah, you asked about early influences. Like I said, I was a big reader. I loved a lot of those books, like The Belgariad and Magician, and a bunch of those from the 80s and 90s were huge influences. Robert Jordan and then Brandon Sanderson were big influences as well. So I've always liked big, epic fantasy books. And most of the books I've written have been big, epic fantasy books. Even though a lot of people will claim that the really big books maybe don't work as well because they take so long to write and everything. But that's how my mind works, and that's what I love. So that's what I've been writing.
That's fantastic. You're known for blending fast-paced adventure with quirky humor and memorable characters. What draws you to that style, and how has it evolved over your career?
Thanks. That's a great question too. Yeah, I like the big epics, and I realized I really love a good action-packed story. And as I started writing, I run into the same problem a lot of people do. When you start writing action, you can get bogged down in the wrong details or too many details, and just figuring out how to make it roll was a big question. Actually, studied some authors that are really good at action, writing good action. And just looking, kind of rereading and studying, how did they do it? How did they structure these scenes? All the way down to, how did they structure the paragraphs and the individual sentences? And, looking at, when you want something to be fast paced, you got to have shorter paragraphs, you got to have shorter punchy sentences, and, all the way down to the actual word structure and building up from there. From that, I got much better at writing action, which is something I love to do. I like books that move along. I don't like to be bored when I read or when I write.
Fair enough.
But the humor stuff, it's funny. My first epic fantasy was kind of, like a big, epic, gritty, multi-layered fantasy and everything. And there was some humor in there, but not a ton. But then I actually had some traditional publishers looking at that for a few years. And in the process, I started writing my young adult fantasy. Because my kids, one of the things that got me back into writing is my kids loved stories. And we lived out in Vermont, kind of out in the countryside, and it was at least a half-hour drive anywhere. And my kids would get in the car and they'd be like, "All right, Dad, a wizard, a necromancer, and a dwarf, go."
Ooh.
And we would just make up a story.
Yeah.
And, it was great exercise mentally. And you get great feedback because if you're telling something that the kids like, they instantly give you that feedback.
Sure.
They're laughing, they're excited. If it's not working, they'll just be like, "Dad, that sucks." So that's great. That instant feedback is fun. And so we started, they helped me come up with an idea for a magic system using rocks, which is what the Petralist is built on. And we started creating this story of the Petralist. And for a year, we invented stories about this guy and his world and everything. And when I started writing the books, I actually made the mistake of writing it in a similar kind of style and feel to that first epic fantasy I wrote. And my family were reading it and they're like, "It kind of is terrible." Like my first draft. And I was talking about with a friend, she was very insightful. She said, "Well, Frank, when you tell these stories, they're hilarious. But when you write them, they're not. Why not?" And that was kind of a big aha moment for me because I was like,
interesting.
I'm just writing them the way I wrote this other fantasy. I didn't think about it, and we have to be intentional with our choices. And I wasn't. I was just falling into habits I'd built up over the last few years. And so then I rewrote the story, kind of imagining it as if I was telling it to my kids. And that allowed me to bring the humor back in. Because anybody who tells a story to kids knows you got to keep them entertained. There's got to be laughter, And so I started incorporating that and kind of realized almost accidentally that I had a real knack for kind of blending those humorous elements into a fast-paced epic fantasy. And that became the Petralist. And then I built on that with Bacon Master of the Apocalypse, just kind of multiplying the insanity to a whole nother level.
Right. I like what you said there as far as, reading to the kids, because if you don't hook their attention and maintain that level of attraction, it's not going to go anywhere too fast. That's a really great perspective.
No, it won't. And, I've done school visits, kind of teaching kids about stories. And I always finish with, a big chunk of it is, let's create a story together. You get a whole classroom of 40 kids giving you ideas. One, they love it. And two, if you don't keep them interested, they wander off so fast.
Right. That they do. So you mentioned about the Petralist. Let's dig a little more into that whole series as itself. So book 1, Set in Stone, introduces a really fun magic system with earth, water, etc. Type powers. What inspired the Petralist world and its unique magic?
Great question. Again, it started, when I was telling my kids stories. Honestly, I was exhausted because they were pushing me so hard. And so I was like, "You guys come up with a magic system and then we'll create stories." And I figured I'd buy myself a few days.
Right.
But by the next day, they came back and they were like, "Dad, let's do rocks." And I was like, okay, tell
Okay.
me about rocks. So I sent them off. My older two kids were like 8 and 10 at the time. And they
Right.
did like this whole term paper on rocks. They came back with like 20 pages of research
Oh, wow.
that they had, they'd done all this research. They pulled it together, and it was really impressive. So I kind of looked at it. I'm like, yeah, we can work with this. So then we're like, all right, let's create the world. And it's like, well, it's going to be rock. So, the location, the setting, let's make it a quarry where they quarry some of these magical stones. But then the twist is they don't know why they're quarrying the magical stones or what they're used for. And that kind of helped kind of create this whole kingdom that the main characters grow up in. That's where magic's very strictly controlled and most people aren't told very much. And so the whole process, especially in book 1 and into book 2, is them trying to discover all these secrets that have been kept from them.
Yeah.
And then from there, we just kind of rounded it out. Like, what could these different stones do? And so the various types of stones, whether they're, igneous or metamorphic or sedimentary, they have different types of powers. And, it started getting really cool.
What fun. And I got to tell you, the research definitely shows, because the whole series is just packed with explosive action, humor, and heart. So now, next question for you, and this may not be a fair one. Which characters were the most fun to write?
That's like when people ask you, what's the favorite book you've ever written?
Exactly. Or which is your favorite child?
Yeah, it's a very hard thing to answer. One of the characters who ended up being just immensely fun, more than I had expected, his name is Hamish, and he started as kind of the goofy sidekick. He's Connor's best friend. Connor's the main character. And, the two of them are kind of, kind of a central buddy pair throughout the series. And he has this habit of sucking on rocks. Because he's always eating something. He's chewing. He's a kid who always has some squished bread in his pocket that he wants to share with you, or he's munching on, but that ends up being the key to unlocking an ancient power not seen in generations.
Right.
And so he ended up being a really fun and funny character, and his food fixation and this new power that he kind of rediscovered after a couple hundred years opened up this whole new aspect to the story that he and another one of the main characters, they're what's called builders, where they can unlock the power of stones, but not within themselves, but just within the stone.
Sure.
And then they can start harnessing that, and they make like engines, and it's, throughout the series it ends up really spawning kind of an industrial revolution, but fueled by these magical stones instead of by like the combustion engine.
Right.
And it created a whole nother aspect to the story that was just fascinating and really, really fun.
What fun. Now, when you wrote in Hamish's character, did he surprise you by taking the story in an unexpected direction?
Yeah. A lot of characters do that, as much as we think we know them.
Yeah.
But he surprised me in a couple different ways. And the food thing was just funny because it just started as kind of his humorous kind of effect that he had that also gave him the excuse to kind of unlock this other power.
Sure.
But it's funny because people respond well to food, which eventually led into Bacon Master.
Yeah.
But as he goes through this series and he's building his powers and he's maturing and they're exploring other parts of the world, his food connection ends up helping him connect with people in other nations in ways that nobody else can. And so he ends up becoming like this international like food diplomat. And it's just, one is hilarious because it's Hamish, but two,
right,
it added a whole depth to his character that, I didn't originally expect because he's just the goofy sidekick, but he ended up being a lot deeper and had additional layers that I wasn't expecting.
For listeners that are new to this series, what would you say is the core appeal to the Petralist, and where does the story go in later books without spoiling too much?
Sure. Well, it's kind of a classic coming of age, young adult epic fantasy. You've got the kind of four main characters, Connor, and he's kind of the guy that everyone's focusing on because he has some powers that eventually become they could be critical to a couple different nations. Everybody wants to control him. He's trying to figure things out. Hamish, we talked about. Their friend Jean, she's the local healer in their town. She doesn't have any magic, but she's the smartest person anybody knows. Kind of like the Hermione of this world.
Yeah.
And then one of the invaders is a gal named Verena, who's another builder like Hamish, and she has a bag of tricks that can stop entire armies. And she has a mean right hook that Connor learns all about. And, so it's a really fun story told from these different point of view characters. And, a lot of them, they're coming from this little town. They don't have any idea what's going on. They get thrust into this, international conflict. And eventually, as the series progresses and they start, delving into secrets that have been hidden for a long time, and they get some good mentor characters and they develop their powers, and then like this international war really breaks out and they end up going to different countries and, really kind of proving critical to, the potential success or survival, of a lot of people.
Sure.
And, so the stakes are big. It's very, there's a lot of humor in there, but it's also very impactful, a lot of heart and a lot of action. And it's kind of blends all that together into what turned into a very epic story.
Nice. You've also got books like Bacon Master of the Apocalypse, Pawn of the Pantryon, and others with a very playful, epic food and gobs vibe. What sparked that world, and how different is it to write compared to your other series?
Oh, sure. That one, actually, if you think like Hamish, he's funny and he's into the food. I was talking with my kids and we were thinking about another story to write because they helped me brainstorm a lot of my stories. And I was like, what if we took Hamish and multiplied him by 10?
Oh, gosh.
And, then we started talking about food. And of course, bacon came up. And we're like, well, it's got to be focused on bacon. And we came up with the whole idea of the gods of the Pantryon, who fuel the different powers. And you got bacon masters and cheese wizards and muffin mages and, vegetable shamans and on and on.
Right.
You have the god of disgusting foods, and you get, so it made this very kind of hilarious framework to then build a really epic fantasy into. And that was really fun. Again, blending, the humor and kind of zaniness into something that's actually a very serious story, in a lot of ways, even while it's hilarious. And you got to get in the right mindset, I think, for that, because, writing something that's really funny that's also, action packed.
Sure.
Balancing that can be tricky. And I find if I'm not like in the right headspace, it doesn't come out right. So different characters can be tricky that way. Like in the Petralist, I have a couple of guys who are kind of goofy sidekicks of the main characters. They're named Thomas and Cameron. They're kind of special forces, magically enhanced super soldiers who could kill you 100 different ways, but they're dumber than a bag of rocks. And just the stuff they come up with, the stuff they say, like, one of them doesn't trust forks because, because the nobility, they use too many forks. And so he's like, never trust a man to use a fork. Another guy is, commenting on how, tickling yourself isn't really that easy, but if you could, it would help you stay awake longer when you're on watch. One of them, he was dating a blind woman because he was really ugly and it would increase his chances. And, just the stuff they come up with was just so funny.
Right.
But they had kind of this street smart that proved really insightful at times, but to get into their mind, kind of their mentality, sometimes took a few minutes because you have to, I think, turn off some parts of like intelligent thought.
Sure. Yeah, you mentioned mindset earlier. Because my wife and I bought a copy of Bacon Master while at Lit RPG Con, and instantly thought of my best friend here locally in town who has a shirt that says "Bacon is my superpower." I was like, dude, you have got to read this book called Bacon Master. He went, all right, cool. Yeah, appreciate it. So he's currently on loan to him right now, and he'll return it to us when he's done reading it. I want to say about 3 or 4 days after I loaned it to him, he calls me, or correction, he came over because he and I brew beer together, and he goes, dude, I don't know about this Bacon Master book. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, it's unlike anything I've ever read before. I'm like, yeah, that's the point.
Yeah.
Have you gotten to the Pantryon of the gods? He goes, the what? I was like, yeah, just get, stick with it, give it some more. And then the next time he comes over, he's all smiles. He goes, so I got to tell you, I'm about 75% of the way through, and this book is hilarious. I'm like, yes, awesome. Good. That's what I want to hear. So figured you would like to hear that as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it a lot.
Absolutely. Let's see. You also write The Face Takers, which is a historical fantasy thriller, and have dipped into sci-fi fantasy blends. How do you switch between these different tones and subgenres?
Yeah, it's that one's really a very unique story. A lot of my stories are definitely kind of push the boundaries of kind of what's the norm out there.
Yeah.
And I want people to be bored. The Face Takers started as this really freaky dream I had. And when I woke up, I was like, dude, I need to write this down, or I probably need counseling, maybe. So I decided to write it down. And so The Face Takers is an urban fantasy thriller that goes back into history, with magic. In some ways, it's a little bit kind of like The Matrix, but through time. So some sci-fi stuff, there's some fantasy stuff. It goes back deeper and deeper into history as you get into it. And it's just a fascinating, just a wonderful story. And it's very, very unique. But great cast of characters, some really amazing characters that I'm really, really thrilled with how they turned out. And of course, we get to travel all around the world doing research into these books.
Yeah.
Because they take place, they kind of go all around the world and then into the history in these places. So we traveled to Italy, and we traveled to China, and we went to Egypt, and we went to Istanbul for a day. That was a good trip. And all over, trying to get a feel for these different cultures and research some of their history. And, one day in another country, you learn more about that country than weeks of research.
Easily.
And then we try to pack as much as, I could into those stories. And it ended up adding a really, really cool, extra layers of reality to the story that probably wouldn't have been there otherwise.
Gotcha. What is the latest project you're excited about, and what can fans look forward to next?
Sure. Well, recently, in the last few years, I got into lit RPG. And that's a genre that seems to be custom made for me because, it's a big epic fantasy. People like big books, which is what I write and what I read. The RPG side of it, with my kids and stuff, we've been playing, kind of D&D and, games and stuff forever. And, it's just felt like coming home when I started reading the lit RPG, and my sons read it, of course, and they're excited to talk about it and brainstorm. And so I came up, we came up with a story, and I wrote like 1 million words in a year, which I'd never done before.
Wow.
And started publishing on a Royal Road, which is, the lit RPG reading site. And mine's called Nexus Runner. And I am having such a blast with this series. And, book 3 just came out in June. The audiobook's coming out in about a month, and book 4 comes out in about 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, September 10th, I think. And I'm writing book 5 right now.
That's fantastic.
So people who like a good, again, action-packed story with,
Yeah.
with some humor in there. This one, Nexus Runner, it's got a quirky AI who loves, Earth entertainment. So he's always quoting movies and stuff. Sometimes he gets it wrong. And
Yeah.
it's, epic monster battles and tons of loot and, unique loot boxes. And it's turning into a great story. So yeah, this one is somebody, people talk about loving Dungeon Crawler. I find that people like Dungeon Crawler and they've read and love stories like Primal Hunter, Discount Dan, Azarinth Healer, that kind of type of story. They love Nexus Runner too. And so it's growing and building a following, and I'm very excited about it.
Good.
And so that's kind of the big focus I'm doing right now, in addition to getting the next Bacon Master book out, and another series I'm starting to work on, on Royal Road. So kind of a lot going on.
Very cool. Now, going back, you mentioned 1 million words in a year. Did I hear that right? Wow.
Yeah.
So tell us that. Walk us through your writing process then. Do you outline heavily, or are you more of a discovery writer?
That's a great question. I think like a lot of people, I do a blend of those.
Okay.
I like to have kind of the major milestone elements of a story figured out, know where I'm going. But then how I get from, say like the inciting incident to the first plot point to the midpoint to the second plot point, each of those in the kind of, as I get into the weeds of writing the scenes, I'll know where I'm going and what I'm trying to do. But I'll let myself free write in there, because as I'm writing and kind of you get in the zone and the world opens up and you can see things that I just don't see. When I outline heavily, I just miss so many things.
Sure.
So, because you just don't know until you get into it. So once I get into it, then, I can be making up all this stuff, but still keep myself, oriented in the right direction. And that helps me from having to totally rewrite entire sections. But that, that's been really fun. And, the Nexus Runner books are pretty huge because there's a lot of battle scenes in there, and, battle scenes take up a lot of space.
Yeah.
So, a lot of action, and, as we get through there, we're developing the cast of characters and, kind of expanding and all of that. And, but yeah, when I dove into it, my sons and I kind of outlined where it was going to go. And then, like I said, it's a story that's really fun to write, so I can really dive in and focus. And yeah, I've never managed to write that many words in that short a time. And now with book 4 coming out, I will have released all of those 1 million words.
Yeah.
Because they're big books, and writing in book 5 right now.
Wow. Now, you've also mentioned earlier taking research trips like to Italy and such, and long walks for plotting. Share a memorable research or aha moment with us that made it into a book.
That's a great question. I also like to, when I'm writing a new book, like the first draft, I'll go hiking and dictate the chapters. I can't do that when I'm editing, which I've been doing a lot the last few months, but just kind of getting ready to start hiking again after not for a while, to write Nexus Runner 5. And that'll be great. But one thing that was really interesting is when I'm doing that, kind of hiking and dictating, I kind of get in that zone of story creation. It's almost like a flow of consciousness sort of thing. I'm speaking it, I'm figuring it out, I'm saying it, but I don't necessarily remember everything I come up with.
Sure.
Because it's just kind of in the moment there.
Yeah.
And then sometimes when I've gone back through to edit it, I don't remember what, all the specifics of what I came up with. So I find myself getting all excited, like, what's going to happen? Because I don't remember, what I came up with. And those moments are really, really fun, because I can catch myself, getting, kind of, worried or excited. even though I came up with it, eventually, I know where it's going to go, but there were certain moments where it's like, I honestly don't know what is going to happen here. And that's really fun.
Yeah.
But there was one time we went to Istanbul because we were flying. I don't remember exactly which trip, but we had a trip. It might have been when we went to Egypt and we're coming back, but our flight routed through Istanbul. And when we saw that, we're like, why don't we expand, our layover for 24 hours? Because we've never been there into Turkey, and that would be really cool. So we did. And we landed in Turkey, and, Istanbul is an amazing ancient city. I did a bunch of research into it, and seeing some of that was just fantastic. And we went in and we found a kind of an old-fashioned Turkish bath that ended up being the best way to deal with jet lag I've ever found.
Oh, wow.
Because, they separate the men and women into different sections.
Yeah.
But I went in and they had this huge room. It was all hot and steamy. And there was like this 30-foot wide slab of like white marble. And it had like hot water all over it. And so I sat on there and kind of got all warm and everything. Then they take you out to another area and they kind of do the whole washing thing. And you come back in, and then they took me out again to do a massage. And the dude doing the massage was brutal. Like he's digging into my legs. Sometimes I like have tight, muscles in my legs.
Yeah.
And he's digging in there and I'm like going, oh. And he looks over and he's this big guy and he couldn't hardly speak English. He just said, pain? And I said, yeah, it hurts. And he's like, good, pain, good. And, it was just such a memorable experience. And later on, I was sitting in this central room, just kind of soaking in. And I hear this other dude in the massage room going, ah. And I was like, he didn't break me, pal.
Oh.
So, some of those experiences, it's like, I never would have learned, about Turkish baths if I hadn't gone in there and experienced that. And what a memory.
Yeah. Man, for some reason, I'm just envisioning like this super huge guy, not necessarily, like muscles or whatever, but just massively huge. And as you lean forward with that word pain, like, oh man, like I can just see like these ham hocks for fists just digging into the back of your leg there. Like, oof.
Yeah. And you could, behind your back, he is just laughing at you.
Oh yeah.
It's just like, I'm going to break this one. And, but that was a good one. Another time when we were in Egypt, like if you go to Egypt, you have to do the Nile cruise. It's the only way to see Egypt. The roads suck, but the riverboat cruises are wonderful. And every day, you go in to see different temples and stuff.
Sure.
And, it was really cool. But we did in Cairo, we went to see the pyramids, which is an amazing experience. But like the city is like right next to the pyramids. Like you could be standing by the pyramids and almost throw a rock and hit a house.
Yeah.
And in all the pictures you see, you think it's out in the middle of the desert. No, there's like this massive city right there.
Huh.
It's bizarre. But our guide going around the pyramids was this really cool old guy, and he knew all this stuff. And we started talking with him and asking about his history and everything. And it turns out he had been, I don't know if he still was, but he had been like the director of the Cairo Museum of Antiquities or whatever.
Ooh.
Like he was this multi-PhD. He was like a world expert on this subject matter. And he was our tour guide because he's like, yeah, the government doesn't pay us. So I guide, tourists to pay the bills. And, he was talking about how, all this stuff about the pyramids and explaining it. I get so many notes out of that. He was talking about he had led a dig and he had discovered this one like secondary pyramid that had housed like these, like he called them the dwarf, like the red dwarf or something. It was like,
right.
Really, really short people, because he said the pharaohs loved, he called them dwarves, or midgets or whatever. And he's like, they love these people who are really short because they figured for some reason, they thought they had more dexterous fingers so they could work their gold more.
Huh.
And because they had short legs, they couldn't run away with the gold. And it was like,
Ah,
seriously? And that was the
wow.
thing. And so he found this crypt of one of these guys who had been one of these goldsmiths, and when the pharaoh died, they killed a whole bunch of his retainers to send him to the afterlife to work for him again. And one of them was this famous goldsmith, and our tour guide had, led the dig to go uncover his crypt. And, just as like writing notes as fast as I could,
Right.
because it's like that kind of those bits and pieces of history and their culture and the way they looked at things. I never would have found that in a million years.
Wow. No, there's just something you don't get from history books or even the History Channel for that matter. It's
Yeah.
only learned through firsthand experience. That is awesome. So, along with that, what would you say is the best writing advice you've ever received?
Good question. I think the first thing is write. I know
Yeah.
a lot of people who talk about writing but don't actually write. But it's like, write until you've done a book, and when you're finished it, then you can fix it because you can't edit something that's not there.
Yeah.
There was a famous, I don't remember who it was, but there's a famous writer who once said something along the lines of, "I'm writing a first draft is like, shoveling sand into a sandbox, and then as I edit, I can take that sand and create a sandcastle." So if I hadn't done the work to do the first draft, I could never polish it and make it amazing.
I like that sandcastle analogy. I'm going to use that. That's really good.
Yeah, that one stuck with me.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember who it was. I'm so bad at remembering names, but it'll come to me as soon as we hang up.
Yeah. I'd asked that question before to several other authors, and it's pretty synonymous across the board as far as, just write, get on the page. Another person phrased it differently, saying, you can't edit a blank page, and went, ooh, that's good. But I love that sandcastle one. That one's really good.
Yeah, I agree.
So
that's why I stole it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm going to yoink that one for myself as well. Beyond writing, what are some of your favorite ways to spend time when you're not at the keyboard?
Great question. I'm big into family. Our kids are all now 20 plus, so my wife and I and the dogs are at home. But we try to get together with them as much as we can. I like hiking, and not only when I'm dictating, but I like hiking. I like camping, all different types of camping. The last few years I've gotten to, motorcycle riding, especially off-road stuff. I'm getting into motorcycle camping, which is a lot like backpacking without the sore shoulders, which I'm enjoying.
Yeah.
My wife and I like to scuba dive, and, we like to travel whenever we can. I think, the world is a big, beautiful place, and it's just, I love exploring new areas and learning about their culture, trying their food, just because people are people everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's great to get to know them. And, I do some martial arts training here in town. We have a great trainer, and try to get that into my books. And, just a lot of different things.
Very cool. Got a couple more questions for you before we draw it to a close here. If you could have any superpower from one of your books or even a new one, what would it be and why?
Great question. That's something we could probably chat about for days.
Yeah.
When I hear that one, there's a lot of powers I've written about that would be really cool to try. When I think about it, the first thing that jumps to mind is, I would like to have the powers of Aquaman.
Okay.
Because not only does he have, the superhuman physique and resistance to damage, which would be nice. A lot of superpowers have that. But especially since I like traveling and exploring and scuba diving, one of the areas that's the least well known are the oceans. And it would be amazing to be able to go explore more of those without needing all that equipment.
Oh man, my wife is a huge fan of the ocean. I think she would love to have that exact same superpower. I mean, Back when we lived in Georgia, we would visit the Georgia Aquarium, which is huge. They've got like one of the largest displays I've ever seen in my entire life. So big that it houses, I think, one, maybe two whale sharks, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
The last time we went, I remember we went through like one of those underwater tunnels, if you will, where you look up at the glass ceiling, got the fish swimming overhead. Really cool stuff.
Oh, yeah, I love those.
And this small little alcove, you can sit and literally press your face up against the glass like a Garfield plushie in a car if you wanted to, and just sit and observe. Well, for me, I'm like, all right, cool. Hi, fish. You're beautiful. Let's move on. No, not my wife. She will sit there and just take it all in and just be in absolute bliss. Just doesn't resonate with me, but hearing you talk about Aquaman powers and wanting to explore the depths of the ocean, yeah, that's right up her alley as well. I think for me, it would have to be Colossus's power from the X-Men, the ability to encase myself in steel at a moment's notice, simply just to protect those that are behind me, because I'm a big guy, bald, 6'4". I can pretty much shield almost everybody with the exception of like basketball players.
Sure. No, that's another great idea. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Frank, final question for you. What is one thing you hope listeners can take away from your stories, whether it's laughter, inspiration, or just a great escape?
Yeah, I think, I love it when people, enjoy the stories because, life sucks sometimes. Life is hard.
Yeah.
And, I write stories, in my heart, I'm an optimist. And I write stories where at some point, somebody on the good guy side is going to win. Just spoiler.
Yeah.
I'm not the kind of guy who's going to write a story where all the heroes die and it's a tragedy. I don't write that, People read stories because they want to escape. They want a vicarious experience, and they want at the end to feel better than when they started.
Yeah. I love that. Frank, thank you so much for your time and the brilliant answers to these questions. I really appreciate our time together today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun. Good to be here.
Yeah. And thank you all, each and every one of you, for tuning into today's episode. If you enjoyed it, I ask that you please rate it and review it, and even subscribe to the channel wherever you get your podcasts, because it helps me to reach more storytellers just like you. You can also drop me a line on social media, or even email me directly about who you would love to hear next, or if you would love to be a guest on the show. I would love to have you. Also, I host a Discord server where I showcase my behind-the-scenes work of audiobook narration. Click the link in the show notes below because I would love to have you as a part of that community as well. And as always, everybody is worthy to be loved. Everybody is worthy to be heard. Everybody has a story to tell. And I want to hear yours. So until I talk to you next time, dear listener, peace be with you.